So one of the biggest shortcomings of this message user class is the string that we're working with. The biggest shortcoming is the fact that it's inside of the module itself. It's not working with an external file, or at least a file outside of the module that pretty much anybody who speaks English can change. We want to adjust that. So in order for us to do that, we have to create a new Python module and actually set up our template stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and create this new module, and I'm going to put it into my Hungry Pi. So Hungry Pi folder. Inside of here, this is where I'm going to put it, and I'm going to call it templates.py. So templates.py is just going to be a very basic Python module that is going to, first of all, accept a path to a template, which we'll see in a second. And then it's going to check whether or not that path exists. And then if it does exist, then we are going to have a function that will render context inside of that template. Now, if you've worked with Django before, or when you work with Django, you will see how valuable this can be when it's a full-on engine. But what we see right here and what we'll do here is the basics of building a template that is fairly easy and straightforward to change. But before we jump into this module itself, let's actually go back into the Hungry Pi folder or directory, and let's create a new folder in here, and I'm going to call this templates. And inside of templates, I'm going to make a new one called inside of templates, we're not going to make a new folder. Instead, we are going to come back into Sublime Text and make a new file and put it inside of templates, and I'm going to call this email message.txt. Notice it's txt, not .py. And that email message is going to come from our original message. I'm going to go ahead and copy it, except for the quotes. I don't need the quotes in here. So it's going to say, hi name, thank you for your purchase total, blah, blah, blah. Right? So we now have that email text. It's actually text, it's a string text, and it's going to work, well, pretty much as we kind of anticipate. So let's go into our templates again. And now I'm going to import a Python module called OS. What this does is it allows Python in Windows and Linux to all play very well together. So OS is operating system, and basically the Mac path is something like this. This is kind of a Mac Linux path, so file.txt, where a Windows path is something more like this. Hi, this is a file. So those are the two different kinds of paths. I'm going to put it into a note here just so you guys can see it. And this it could cause a little bit of an issue if we were just working with those raw paths themselves. That is, there's a function called open, and yes, I could definitely use this path to open something, right, if it existed. So this file right here, or this built-in Python function called open, will actually open a file, and if we just did .read, it will actually read it. But the problem here is this function will fail on a Mac, and vice versa. If I use the Mac version and paste that in, that will fail on a Windows. So neither one of those things do we actually want to do. Let's just put those in there for reference. So instead, what we want to do is use something called ospath.join. And what this will do is it will take whatever path we put in there and make it like system agnostic. So it works on either system just fine. Okay, so this is the method we're going to be using. So I'm going to go ahead and do a few things here. And I'm going to define get template path, and we're going to call it path. And we want to get the text path, or the file path, equaling to ospath.join, and then it's going to be os.get cwd parentheses comma path. I'll explain this stuff in just a second, and then we'll return our file path. Okay, so this function right here is taking a path in as an argument, and then we use the ospath.join method to take the get current working directory and the path of whatever that is. So this is just going to give us a path to something. So let's just do an arbitrary path or an arbitrary file. I'll say file underscore equals to this is a file.txt, And now I'll use that get template path method with that file path. Okay, so these file paths, you might be wondering what the heck is a file path and why do I care about it? So if I go back into Finder and go to this email message and go to the information for it, I see where it says where. It says Macintosh HD, users, CFE, desktop, Hungry Pi, templates, right? So that's the actual path to where this file is stored on the hard drive. So that's what these paths are for. It's finding where they're stored on the hard drive so then Python can open it, open and read it. That's really all we're doing right here is figuring out those paths. Now right now, this file does not actually exist. This is not a valid path, but I'm not going to worry about that yet. Instead, I'm just going to see what happens from this function call. So I'm going to go ahead and copy everything here. And I'm still in Python 3, but let's go ahead and just do it again. Paste this in, and what I get when I do get template path of this file, I get this is a file.txt. So it went to get current working directory and path, and then it combined those two things. So what's os.get current working directory? It gives us that. So this path should actually combine these two things. So let's try that one more time with get template path of the file. And we are getting not the full path, so that's not exactly what we want. So let's get rid of this first slash here. And instead, I'm just going to keep it as that. I'm going to go ahead and copy this, paste it in, and now we're getting that entire path. So notice that slash actually made a difference to how the path was coming out. It's now saying it's going to come from the desktop. It's looking for this file in particular. Now, of course, this file doesn't actually exist. So there's another way to check if it exists. And we can say if not ospath.isFile of this file path, we can raise our own exception by just writing out raise exception, capitalize E there, of course, and then whatever we want to say. This is not a valid template path. Okay, so let's try that again. I'm going to go ahead and copy this and paste it in here, and we get that exception. So it actually raised an exception like what we've seen with other things. So this is how we make our own exceptions. We could customize this stuff, but it's not something I want to worry about right now. It's more of the fact that we said this is not a valid template path. Of course, we could write the path in there, but this is just a string that you can come through and substitute with. Okay, so now let's actually find a place for this to live where it is a valid path. Well, it just so happens that email underscore message.txt is a valid path. So let's go ahead and jump into that templates again. And what the path would be relative to templates.py is templates and then email message. So let's look at this again. And I'll type out this file now as templates /email underscore message.txt. So what's going on here? Inside of relative to where the templates.py file is, the template folder is right up. That's where that comes from. And then finally the txt file. So let's save it. And I'm going to now print out the result from that get template path stuff. So we shouldn't see an exception here. But now how do we actually run this templates.py file? All we've been doing so far is copying and pasting this. So if I actually jump into my terminal and exit out of here, and I'm going to change into the Hungry Pi folder. If I list that out, I see now I got templates.py and templates. So if I type out Python, or Python 3 in my case, I do templates.py, press enter, and what do you know? It actually gives me the path to email message. Now, of course, if I change this to email message 2, hit saved, and press up again, press enter, and now gives me that exception. Great. So it's now saying what's invalid about this. So since we aren't sure about that, let's go ahead and add in the path that's being passed with some quick old string substitution there. Okay, so we try that one more time, and now it's giving us the actual path that's invalid. Okay, this is good. So now from here, what we can do is we're only validating the path, right? So we're getting the actual path. We're not getting what's inside of this message. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that too. And now what I'm going to do is make another method or another function called define get template. So this time it's still going to take in the path, but now what it's going to do, instead of just returning the path, it's going to open it and read it for us. So we're going to say the opened message, or the message, is going to be something, right? So first of all, we'll do file path equals to get template path of the path. And this right here is the same argument that's coming through. And then what we're going to do is we're going to return open, and there's going to be file path dot read. So this is how you open a file right here, and this read will actually read it for us. So it actually is able to manipulate it instead of just opening it. I'm sure, of course, there's a lot more to it than just that, but that's essentially what we want. We want to open it, and then we want to look at it. And this is what is doing that specifically. And then finally, so now that we have this, let's go ahead and run this. I'm going to do get template now instead of get template path of that same file. I'm going to save it, and I'm going to go ahead and run it again. And now what we see is, hey, check that out. We've got our context actually coming through. So I say change it to hello and save it. Press up, enter, and now it says hello. Awesome. We're really, really close now. All we have to do is figure out how to change what's coming on here. Well, if you remember back to string substitution, we can actually say template text equals to that, and then we can do dot format, and I can say name equals to Justin. And then let's just print out that template text. And I'm going to press up, press enter. I get this now key error of date. Now that's because of this, right? So date is it's trying to render it, but it's not. So I'll just say date equals to ABC, and the last one I believe is total. We're just going to put total equals to none. Save that, try that again, and now what we've got in here is it's actually changing the context just as we see fit. Cool, so that's doing a lot for us. But this is a mess, right? So we could do one more thing, and that is rendering context, and we can define render underscore context, and it's going to take in the template string this time and some context dictionary, and then we're going to return the template string dot format, and we're going to use star star context. We'll explain that in a second. So now let's actually set up our context down here. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this template text again. And now what I want to do is context equals to a dictionary, and we'll say name is Justin. And then we're going to return, and then we just want to print out render context, and now it's saying template string, so we still need to get the template. So I'll say the template equals to get template of that file path, so file underscore. So we've got our file path, we've got our template, and our context, so render context of template, and then context. All right, so this right here, the star star, is saying format the string based on a dictionary. If you don't have that star star and pass a dictionary, errors will happen. So we save it, and let's run it again and see what happens. Same thing, we get this date key error, right? So when it's formatting everything, that date is not actually coming through. So I'm just going to say date is none, and then I'll also say total is none. Save it, do it again, and there we go. So we've got our rendering of this template that we actually have. So very easy, very straightforward, and also very useful. So I'm going to go ahead and move these notes to the bottom because we actually don't need to see those anymore, but I'm going to leave them for you guys just in case you need to reference them. But now that we've got this, let's do one more template and just see if it works with an HTML template. So let's make a new file, and I'll call it email underscore message.html. And now I want to paste in some HTML code. Paste in the code, and I'll say hello, hey, name. And then I can just do date and total again. So I'll just put that in here and say date and total. and another line break. Okay, so now we've got some HTML. Let's go back into our templates. I'm going to copy this file line again, and I'll just now say file_HTML. Change this to HTML, and now get template HTML is now that. We use file HTML. We can copy this, and same context, different templates. Save it, run into the terminal, Python 3, and what do we've got? We have our HTML being rendered here, and we have our plain text being rendered there. Cool, so that is how we actually use templates. Now, there's a lot of things that we talked about in here that should be of note. First of all, using that format function inside of this string means that our context or anything that we pass through it needs to be there. So everything that's going to be replaced needs to be there. Secondly, we want to make sure our actual file exists, and that's what this method is for. And then once we know that it exists, we're going to get that template, we're going to open it and actually look at it. And then, of course, we render that context. We bring whatever's in this dictionary and put it into this template. Now, what you see right here is actually the basis for Django and how it actually works in so many ways. So Django, of course, is a web framework for Python for building web applications. And this is a very toned down, simple version of how a fundamental feature of Django actually works, and that has to do with displaying HTML data. So if you're really interested in that, definitely check out some of our Try Django series on joincfe.com/YouTube or just joincfe.com/projects. So that's it for templates for now. I do want to challenge you to change the context as well as these files themselves, and realize that this path has to be done in this way. If it's done differently, you might run into errors. And again, this is not the perfect solution, but it is a very solid one, especially since now I could train anyone on my staff to be able to update and change this given these variables. One thing let's actually test is I want to get rid of one of these context variables. Just get rid of it completely, save that, and now let's run it. And notice that when I get rid of the context variable, it just doesn't render, but there is no error, right? It just does not show up whatsoever, which is also very nice. One last thing about how cool Django is when it comes to stuff like this is there's a way to use actual logic inside of these things. So if I said if ABC, show ABC, and then I could say some end-if function. That is actually really cool about Django's templating system. There are other Python templating systems out there that you could probably adapt to work with this, but we're going to be sticking it very, very basic. I just wanted to give you a taste of what Django could do as well, because Django just really takes this to a whole nother level and just makes it that much better. So we're now at a point to implement this portion into our actual message users stuff. But I'm going to leave it at this for now. If you have any questions, let us know. Otherwise, we'll see you tomorrow.